Hello and welcome to Tech Talks with Kinsoft. It's great to have you with us.
Great to be here.
Today we're going to strip back the headlines a bit and look at the operational reality of running a business in a digital world. We spend so much time talking about tech as this magical enabler.
The thing that speeds you up connects you to everyone.
Exactly. But today we need to look at the flip side. What happens when the tech just stops you dead in your tracks?
It's the side of the coin we all hope to avoid, but statistically, it's the one we're most likely to encounter at some point. We aren't talking shiny new gadgets today. We're looking at that stomach-dropping moment when the screen goes dark, the data vanishes, and suddenly the clock is ticking on your legal obligations.
Precisely. And usually when we talk about cyber incidents, it's always the big one, right? State-sponsored actors, global banks. It feels like a movie.
A bit abstract.
Yeah, a bit abstract. So I wanted to shift the lens today. We've got a stack of sources here about a really significant incident from late 2025 involving a company called VETtrak and their platform, VETtrak.
And this is such a crucial case study because VETtrak, it's not some abstract cloud thing. It is the engine room for a massive chunk of Australia's vocational education and training sector.
Right.
If you've done a TAFE course, a certificate, any kind of trade upskilling in Australia, there is a very, very high chance your data has passed through this system.
So our mission today is to use this specific incident, the VETtrak breach, as a kind of a live autopsy.
Yeah.
We're going to break down the timeline of a supply chain attack to see how it actually unfolds day by day. But then, and this is the important part, we need to answer the so what question. We're going to pivot to the Australian regulatory landscape, specifically the Notifiable Data Breaches Scheme, or NDB.
Because when things go wrong, the law has a very specific script you have to follow.
There's not a free-for-all.
Not at all. There is a playbook, and if you don't follow that script, the consequences, legal, financial, reputational, can actually be worse than the hack itself.
Okay, so let's start with the anatomy of the breach itself. I was reading through the timeline, and what really struck me was that fog of war phase at the beginning. We think a hack is instant, skull and crossbones on the screen.
But it's almost never like that. This began on October 16th, 2025. VETtrak customers experienced what was just labeled an outage.
An outage.
And for anyone in IT, outage is such a loaded word. It covers a multitude of sins. It could be a failed router, or it could mean someone is, actively encrypting your entire database.
And that ambiguity, it lasted for a painfully long time. It wasn't until November 3rd, that's over 2 weeks later, that VETtrak confirmed it was a cyber attack.
That gap must have been just excruciating for their customers. The training colleges, the organizations.
They're flying blind.
Totally flying blind. You can't tell your students what's happening because you don't even know. But while everyone was waiting in that limbo, things were escalating behind the scenes. The sources say that on October 31st, Halloween, at 9 p.m. AEDT, the threat actors stopped playing games.
That's the escalation point. They published 13,866 files on the dark web.
And that's the pivot.
Right. We moved from a business continuity problem software not working to a full-blown privacy crisis.
Precisely. And we need to look at the collateral damage here. VETtrak identified that 23 specific customers were caught up in that data dump.
Now, seeing that number, 23, my first reaction was only 23. That seems low. We're so used to hearing about millions of accounts.
It does sound low, yeah, especially compared to the massive user base of VETtrak. They estimated fewer than 3,000 individuals were affected. But, and this is so important, in data breaches, we have to stop looking at the volume and start looking at the value.
The toxicity of the data.
The toxicity, the sensitivity. You have to look at what was actually lost.
And one of the victims profiled in the reports really brings this home. VETcho, the Victorian Aboriginal Community-Controlled Health Organization. This isn't just a marketing list of email addresses we're talking about. It's student records for Aboriginal health workers.
That changes the entire calculation. The sources list Medicare numbers, identity documents, driver's licenses.
That's the holy trinity for identity theft.
It really is. If you lose that data, you're not just changing a password. You are monitoring your credit report for the next 5 years.
And think about the trust dynamic there. VETcho is a community organization. Their students trust them with their entire lives, their careers. The impact of having to tell those students, we lost your ID, is just, it's devastating.
It's a huge breach of trust. They had to advise students to contact ID Care, which is the National Support Service for Identity Theft, and verify all their identity documents. It just disrupts that foundational trust.
It really does. Now, there's a fascinating legal maneuver in this timeline that I think is worth unpacking. On October 29th, VETtrak went to the NSW Supreme Court and got an injunction.
Right, basically a court order.
Yeah, a court order prohibiting access to or dissemination of the stolen data.
Yeah.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here. We're talking about the dark web.
Mm-hmm.
It's run by international criminal syndicates who, by definition, do not care about the Supreme Court of New South Wales. So is an injunction just an expensive piece of paper? Does it actually do anything?
It's a valid skepticism. And technically, you're right. The hackers aren't going to take the files down because a judge said so. They're beyond the jurisdiction.
So what's the point?
Strategically, it's actually a very smart move for containing the damage on the surface web.
Ah, so it targets the onlookers.
Yeah.
The people who might share it on Twitter or Reddit.
Exactly. It makes it illegal for journalists, for curious onlookers, or other bad actors to download or share that data. It puts a big do not enter sign around the toxic spill. It doesn't clean it up, but it stops the average person from walking through it and spreading it further.
That's a helpful distinction. It limits the blast radius. Now, before we terrify everyone listening who uses cloud software, there is an important nuance here regarding a group called Signature Training College.
Right. There were also VETtrak users.
But they came out with a very clear statement confirming they were not among the 23 affected customers.
Which highlights a key part of modern cloud architecture that business owners really need to get their heads around. It's rarely one giant bucket.
Right.
Just because the platform takes a hit doesn't mean every single tenant, every customer is compromised. It depends on which server your instance was on, which database was accessed. It shows the importance of compartmentalization.
But for the 23 who were hit, the reality shifted immediately from tech problem to legal problem.
And that brings us to the core of our discussion today, the so what moment. When an organization like VETtrak realizes their data is out there, they can't just fix the firewall and, hope nobody notices.
No, we operate under a very strict regime here in Australia.
The Notifiable Data Breaches Scheme, or NDB, it's part of the Privacy Act, 1988, and when it came in, it fundamentally changed the game. Before the NDB, companies could, and look, they often did, sweep things under the rug.
To save face.
To save face. Now, that silence is illegal.
But I think there's still confusion about the threshold. I mean, if I leave a USB stick with some marketing brochures on the bus, surely I don't have to report that to the government. That seems excessive.
You're right, there is a threshold. It's not just any data loss. According to the guidance we have from Infotech, there are 3 specific triggers that must all be met to force a notification.
Okay, walk us through them. What's trigger number 1?
First, there has to be unauthorized access, disclosure, or loss of personal information. That's the event itself. The hack, the lost laptop, the email sent to the wrong person.
Okay, standard. Trigger 2.
Second, and this is the subjective part that trips people up, a reasonable person would conclude that this is likely to result in serious harm to the individuals involved.
Okay, I want to pin down serious harm because I feel like a lot of executives hear that and just think financial loss. They think, well, no one's bank account was drained, so it's not serious.
That is a very dangerous misconception. The definition of serious harm in the Privacy Act is much, much broader than your bank balance. Yes, it includes financial fraud, of course, but it also includes things like physical harm.
A stalker getting a home address.
Exactly. It includes reputational damage.
That's a huge one. If a medical status or, workplace dispute record gets leaked, that could ruin a career.
Absolutely. And it also includes emotional distress. If a breach causes significant anxiety, which having your Medicare number stolen definitely does, that counts as serious harm. So the bar for harm is actually quite low.
Okay, and the third trigger?
The third is the get-out-of-jail-free card, in a way. Notification is only required if the entity has been unable to prevent the likely risk of serious harm through remedial action.
So, going back to my USB stick example, if I realize I lost it, but I use a remote management tool to wipe it before anyone can plug it in,
then you have prevented the risk of harm. The data is gone, but the risk is neutralized. No harm, no notification. That's why having remote wipe capabilities isn't just a tech feature. It's a compliance shield.
That makes perfect sense. Now, who are we talking about here? Is this just for the big banks and telcos?
The general rule is any business with an annual turnover of more than $3 million. So your local cafe is probably exempt?
But wait, VETtrak is a nonprofit, and a lot of training colleges aren't massive corporations. So why were they on the hook in this VETtrak incident?
Because there are critical exceptions. Regardless of your revenue, if you are a healthcare provider or an educational institution, you must comply.
So if you hold the data, you hold the liability.
Correct. The government decides that health and student records are just too sensitive to be unregulated. It also applies to anyone handling tax file numbers. So basically, if you employ staff in Australia, you're almost certainly caught in this net.
Okay, so we've established the triggers. Now I want to put our listener in the hot seat. Imagine it's Tuesday morning, you get an email from your IT manager, or maybe a ransom note just pops up on your screen. You've been breached. Panic sets in. What do you actually do?
The first thing to do is suppress the urge to just scream. You need to follow the 4-step process from the scheme, and step 1 is purely operational. Contain the breach.
Stop the bleeding.
Immediately. This isn't about finding out who did it yet. That comes later. This is about shutting down compromised accounts, disconnecting infected servers, changing master passwords. You have to make sure the data loss stops now.
Okay, the bleeding is stopped. The server is offline. What's step 2?
Assessment. And this is where the clock starts ticking. You have a strict 30-day window to investigate. You need to review logs, interview staff, maybe bring in forensic experts. You are trying to answer one question. Is serious harm likely?
30 days sounds like a long time, but I imagine in a crisis, with lawyers and PR teams all involved, that time it evaporates.
It vanishes. Especially if your logs are messy or non-existent. If you can't prove what wasn't taken, you often have to assume the worst.
So let's say the assessment comes back bad. Harm is likely. Step 3.
Notification. You have to notify the individuals who are affected, and this is crucial. The guidelines are very specific and must be in plain English.
So no hiding behind legal jargon, no unforeseen anomaly in the subnet.
No. You have to be transparent, tell them what information was compromised, and, most importantly, what steps they should take to protect themselves. Look at VETtrak again. They didn't just say, oops, they gave actionable advice. Contact ID Care, watch for these scams.
It empowers the victim, which is the whole point. And finally, step 4.
You have to tell the regulator. You submit a form to the OAIC, the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner. And your story to them has to match your story to your customers.
Now, I have to ask the cynical question that I'm sure some business owners are thinking. What if I just don't? What if I roll the dice, hide it, and hope it never comes out?
That is a high-stakes gamble with very, very poor odds. If you're caught covering up, the OAIC has teeth. They can issue public reprimands, which are humiliating. They can issue compensation orders, and they can pursue civil penalties of up to $2.5 million.
$2.5 million.
Yeah.
That's a serious hit to the bottom line for almost any business.
It is. But honestly, most experts agree the fine is the lesser evil. The real cost is your reputation.
The trust deficit.
Exactly. Customers, they understand that cybercrime happens. It's a fact of life in 2026. They might forgive you for getting hacked. They will very rarely forgive you for lying about it.
Right.
If you hide it and it leaks later, and on the dark web, things always leak eventually, your credibility is just destroyed.
Transparency beats cover-ups every time. Okay, so we've covered the horror story of the breach, and we've covered the legal rule book. Let's talk about how to stop this from becoming our reality. Let's talk prevention.
Prevention is always cheaper than remediation. The VETtrak guide breaks this down into 2 main pillars, the human factor and the tech essentials.
Let's start with the humans, because as much as we love technology, we are usually the problem, aren't we?
Unfortunately, yes. Look, sophisticated code is dangerous, but simple human error is often the open door. Someone reusing their Netflix password on their work email, someone clicking a phishing link because they were in a rush.
So what's the fix? Is it just telling people don't do that?
It's continuous training. It can't be a boring video once a year that everyone just skips through. It has to be regular.
Yeah.
Phishing simulations, password hygiene checks. You have to build a security culture where staff aren't afraid to report a mistake.
That's a great point.
If someone clicks a link, you want them to call IT immediately, not hide it because they're afraid of getting in trouble.
Make it safe to fail, so you can fix it fast. And on the tech side, I feel like we shout this from the rooftops every week, but let's say it again for the people in the back.
Multi-factor authentication, MFA. You do not have MFA turned on for your critical systems. You are, frankly, being negligent at this point. It stops the vast majority of these attacks.
It's the seatbelt of the internet. Just click it, takes 2 seconds.
Exactly. Beyond that, it's the unglamorous stuff. Patching your software. Those annoying update tonight prompts, they often contain critical security fixes. If you delay the update, you're leaving the door wide open for hackers.
There's one more recommendation in here that I think is the most overlooked but possibly the most valuable. The incident response plan.
This is the difference between a crisis and a disaster. You do not want to be making decisions when your hair is on fire. You need a document written now that outlines exactly who does what.
Like a fire drill for data.
Precisely. Who calls the lawyers? Who has the authority to shut down the e-commerce store? Who drafts the press release? You need these roles defined, and you need to test it. Do a tabletop exercise once a year, sit around a table and simulate a VETtrak style breach. Okay, the server's down, what do we do? See if your team actually knows.
That is such solid advice, because when the panic hits, your IQ drops about 20 points. You want to be following a checklist, not improvising.
Precisely. Improvisation is great for jazz, terrible for cybersecurity.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the VETtrak incident, seeing how a silent outage morphed into a dark web data dump affecting vulnerable students.
We saw how that triggered the legal machinery of the NDB scheme, forcing organizations like VETtrak to notify and protect their people.
We unpacked that 30-day ticking clock: contain, assess, notify, report, and we emphasized that serious harm isn't just about bank accounts. It's about reputation and mental well-being.
And finally, the pivot to prevention. Train your humans, update your tech, and please, for the love of God, have a plan written down.
So I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. We've talked about that sinking feeling when you realize you've been breached, the oh no moment.
It's the moment you realize your business is no longer under your control.
If that happened to you in the next hour, if you got that call right now, would you know who to call? Would your team know which server to isolate? Or would you be sitting there Googling what to do during a data breach?
That is the question that should keep directors awake at night. If the answer is, I'd be Googling it, you are already behind the curve.
You certainly are. But look, if you're listening to this and thinking, I don't have a plan, or I'm not sure if my backup strategy is actually compliant, you really don't have to figure it out alone in the dark.
No, that's what experts are for. Security is complex, but getting good advice is simple.
That's why we strongly suggest you head over to www.kinsoft.com.au. Whether you need to audit your security setup, discuss your IT needs, or just want to make sure you're prepared for exactly these kinds of scenarios, they are the team to talk to.
Absolutely. Don't wait for the breach to meet your IT partner. Go to www.kinsoft.com.au and get on the front foot.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of the VETtrak incident and the NDB landscape. It's been a heavy topic, but an essential one.
Always a pleasure. Stay safe and keep those passwords strong.
We'll catch you next time on Tech Talks with Kinsoft. Bye for now.